What's up guys? Today we're gonna be talking about setting up for the squat and then walking out the bar in the rack. A lot of people think they do this right, but doing a little bit of fine tuning here and there over the course of time, especially as you start to load the weight, can be super helpful, especially for more beginner and intermediate athletes. Now let's dive into setting up for the squat. So before we dive into the 5 steps of unracking the squat and getting into position, let's talk about Jhook height. So 2 rules of thumb when setting your Jhook height, and this is especially true for beginners, is number 1, you never want to have to get up on your tippy toes to unrack the weight, whether you're front squatting, low bar squatting, high bar squatting, it doesn't matter. Do not get up on your tippy toes in order to unrack the weight. Number 2, be mindful of the depth of the hook. Lower setting hooks, you're gonna have to position a little bit lower on the rack. So if there's a deeper hook here, you never wanna have a chance of clipping that when you're unracking or re-racking the weight. So pay strong attention to the depth of the hook. If it's a little bit higher, then you could usually position a little bit higher and be safe, but you never want a chance clipping this and getting uneven before initiating your squat. So now let's start with step 1 of unracking the weight and getting into position for the squat. All right, so step 1 is gonna be establishing your grip width. This is extremely important for creating that strong shelf on the back. Now we're not gonna go into some of the nuanced differences between high bar and low bar squats and differences in mobility between athletes. So we'll just talk about a couple rules of thumb to always keep in mind. So for this squat, I'm gonna position my hands in a position that have my elbows down and back and keep my traps nice and packed, serving as that strong shelf. So doing this is gonna put me in a strong position before initiating the weight and lifting it off the rack. So something to also keep in mind is that as we have that nice strong packed position, we have our elbows down and back because if they flare up, that's gonna dip the torso forward. And if we're already feeling that dip coming out of the rack, we're gonna be in a bad position as we head into our set. So number 1 and step 1 is establishing the proper grip width for the initiation of the setup. All right, so step 2 is now positioning the bar on the back accordingly. So we've talked about grip width, we briefly touched on this in point 1, but whether you're low bar or high bar squatting, that's gonna be a big determinant on how you're gonna be unracking the weight. For this example, I'm gonna do a high bar squat. So now that I have my grip, I'm gonna position myself under the bar and I'm gonna put it right on top of those packed traps. And that's gonna serve as a nice stable shelf for me to position and get stable before unracking the weight. Now, if you're low bar, that bar is gonna be sitting a little bit on the posterior delt, and it's gonna vary a little bit from athlete to athlete. We've made a video on the high bar versus low bar. We'll link that up there in the card, so check that out if you have not. But step 2 is positioning the bar on the back accordingly to how you're squatting. Step 3, now that we have our grip width, we're nice and packed, our elbows are down and back, we have the bar positioned firmly on the back, let's take it to the feet. What do we do when we're unracking the weight? All right, so when it comes to the foot positioning and you're unracking, generally a parallel stance, somewhat similar or a little bit more narrow than what you're squatting with, is the best bet for most athletes. Now, you will see athletes stagger from time to time, but for true beginners, I would recommend going with a parallel stance. This is gonna allow you to stand up that weight and get settled evenly before physically walking the weight back. All right, so step 4 is bracing and lifting the weight before the walkout. So this step is incredibly important. Why? Well, for starters, when you're unracking that weight, it's the first time you're getting a sense for feeling that weight on your back. So as you're getting to heavier sets, having a very strong unrack and settling and getting nice and braced before walking the weight back is a great way to boost your confidence heading into a heavier set. So what we are gonna do is we're gonna get set using our steps 1 through 3. We're gonna get those feet in position. We're gonna take our hips, bring them slightly under the bar. We don't want our hips back here because then we're gonna end up doing a little baby good morning. So our hips are gonna be slightly posterior tilted under the bar, and we're gonna think about taking that nice big belly breath, pushing out into the obliques, and standing up the weight. Again, this is the first time we're gonna be feeling that weight on our back, and that is big for just kind of getting that nervous system and overall feeling of what we're about to do in the walkout and through the set. All right, step 5 is the walkout. So for this video example, we're gonna be doing the 3-step walkout. That's generally the most easy to accomplish walkout for most beginner and intermediate athletes. So here's how you do it. So step 1, we have our grip width. Step 2, the bar is positioned on our back. Step 3, we are in position with our feet. Step 4, we have our hips under the bar. We're braced. We're gonna lift off. So now how do you do the walkout? So you're gonna step back that first foot. The first foot is going to be the foot that you plant when kicking a ball, and then you're gonna step back your second foot, and then you're gonna take a baby step with that third, looking down, screwing in the feet, and getting into position before beginning your descent. Now, when it comes to the sequencing of the 3-step walkout. You can, in reality, use either foot to step back first. Why I like to coach it this way with the planted foot when you kick a ball first is that as you step back that weight, you're gonna be in an odd position. So I like having that weight on the planted foot that you're used to planting when doing different sports, because it just is a little bit more comfortable when it comes to just the overall stability, especially with the unilateral positioning like this where you're stepping back. And then it's a little bit easier to step back the second foot. Now, when it comes to how far you should step back, it's gonna vary a little bit. Scale that on the rack you're in and just your overall needs. Obviously, if you're a shorter lifter, don't step back a crazy amount and leave yourself in a weird position where you can't get any drive off that first foot. A good rule of thumb is thinking like 2 or 3 feet. Now, obviously, if your rack is a little bit more drawn out or you need to step back to avoid hitting the safeties, so for racks that come out and then make that more of an L shape, you might have to take a couple additional steps, but overall, that's how you do a 3-step walkout with success. So that concludes our squat, setup, and walkout video. Now, I provided 5 steps in this video. You might find that you need more or less than that. Hopefully they helped you or at least gave you a couple pointers along the way if you are tripping up in any area. If you want to learn more, make sure to Google BarBend and squat walkout.